What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got an exciting review of a really cool knife for you. This is the Zero Tolerance 0909. This is actually one of my favorite folding knives of all time. If you've been watching the channel, before the weekend I said I had a second unboxing video to do. This was going to be that unboxing, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and just do the review on it. So let's go ahead and get started here. Quick specs. I don't have my Manix 2 for comparison here with me today because I'm carrying this guy. This is an 8.5 inch overall folding knife with a 3.8 inch cutting edge. So you've got quite a bit of blade to handle ratio there, and I think that's pretty cool. This is a high saber ground drop point blade that is stonewashed and comes in CPM S35VN steel. This is a Les George design in collaboration with ZT. It's actually designed after Les George's Talos model, which I've owned along with the VECP Midtech. And Les George designs are actually the only other designs only other knife designs that I like as much as Hinderer designs. Again, if you're familiar with my channel, you know I'm a big Hinderer fan. So, of course, when this collaboration between ZT and Les George came out, I had to get my hands on this. This is actually the second time that I've owned this knife. The first time I bought it right when it came out, and then like a lot of guys like me who trade and buy and sell knives, I played with it until I was bored with it, and then I sold it and bought something else. But I saw here recently that this was discontinued, and the price dropped to $130. Originally, this was $180. But at $130, this is a no-brainer. I'm going to go over why, because I think this is excellent. I justified it at its original price, and I can easily justify it at $130. So, anyways, we have a super functional drop point high saber ground blade, 0.155 thick stock. You've got nice thickness all the way down to the tip. So definitely some major benefits there in strength and durability. But where this starts to drop is pretty high. So when it comes down, when it finally gets down to the cutting edge, what you end up with is a very thin cutting edge. So in terms of how well this thing slices, amazing. Way better than you would ever expect from a heavy-duty folding knife like this with a really thick stock. When I say that, I mean this thing slices competitively with my Manix 2. And for anybody who's familiar with the Manix 2, that very thin, fully flat ground leaf-shaped blade is an excellent slicer, and I am equally impressed with this guy. So that's great. You have a very, very functional blade shape, benefits in strength, benefits in cutting ability, and there's also 3.8 inches of it. So there's really not that much to complain about there. Your front scales here are G10 peel ply texture, and then you've got some kind of smooth parts right here that are more aesthetic than anything. 2 Torx head body screws that are oversized, which is again the nature of ZT. And then you also have this big ugly pivot that really is more for. You could make an argument for strength in that thing. I mean, the 1/4 inch pivot setup there goes all the way through. The bolt goes all the way through to the nut, and then you've got this front face here that could be adjusted with a wrench or a socket head. I don't really think that it's actually getting in the way of anything, and while it is ugly, you can't really. There's not really any disadvantage to it. It's just it goes along with the theme of the knife, and I don't think there's any real issue with that. Some people don't like it, but I don't really care. You know, if this was a lighter, more indoor use, everyday carry folding knife, then that would certainly be out of place, but I don't think that it's really out of place on a knife like this, okay? It makes sense to me that that's how it would look. You've got ultra oversized liners here. These are steel liners, and they look to be nearly double thickness of any other steel liner I've ever seen on a liner lock knife. You've got an open body construction with 2 standoffs back here, so that's great. No milling on the inside. They are solid liners all the way through, and then you've got another G10 scale on this side. Hex head shape on the reverse, which will keep one side of this from turning, so that's pretty nice. And then you've got 2 more Torx head body screws back here, and this little teeny tiny pocket clip, which is truthfully the only thing about this knife that I personally don't like. Functionally, the clip's going to hold the knife to your pocket, and that's about it. But given the scenario that you would carry this knife in, which is outside, you know, construction site, hiking, camping, you know, any situation where you might want an overbuilt folding knife, this is going to catch on something and just break off. I mean, I feel like that's inevitably going to happen. You can definitely get an aftermarket titanium clip for this, or if it breaks off, you could just keep having ZT sending you spare clips, which I'm sure they'll do without any hassle. But that's really the only thing that I don't like about this knife is just that pocket clip. You do have options for right or left-handed tip up, so that's just fine. This is a flipper design, and only a flipper design. There is no thumb stud. You've got a super, super heavy detent. Let me show that again. Very heavy detent on this knife, which is something that I really like. It really attributes to how well this thing flips. ZT is already well known for having some of the best flipping action in the knife world, and this knife just takes that above and beyond. And I'm a big fan of heavy detents. Some people don't like that as much. But I really like that. And again, it goes along with the nature of this knife in a hard use scenario. You absolutely cannot get this thing to shake out of the handle. There's just no way. I mean, I could literally go outside and plant my feet and swing this thing as hard as possible and try and get this to whip out. But it will not do it. So that's a really big plus to me in terms of, you know, the hard use nature of this folding knife. But again, everybody's going to have different opinions on that. You do have some functional jimping up here at the top of the knife. For those of you who have owned or handled a Les George Talus, you'll know that jimping on his mid-tech model is kind of non-functional and more aesthetic than anything. On this, it is fairly functional. You can get some traction in there. If you're wearing gloves, obviously you're going to get more traction. But you know, it does provide a nice secure purchase. Speaking of the purchase, the ergonomics on this knife are excellent. In the standard position here, you do have a little bit of a parrot's beak back here, so if you're going to do some light chopping with 3-finger or 2-finger position, you know, you definitely can do that. The flipper tab has jimping both on top and on the bottom, and some people argue that the flipper tab might actually be a little bit too big, but I think it's one of those things where it really doesn't matter to me. I mean, this has got one means of deployment. It offers a nice secure grip right here. Your finger is not going to be running up onto the blade, given that there's jimping down there. Some people, I think, would have liked to have seen a choil up on the blade, but again, I don't really care. I mean, there's pros and cons either way. The fact that there's not a choil and there's no second means of deployment like a thumb stud here means you have full use of that 3.8-inch cutting edge without it getting hung up on anything, the choil or the pivot while you're cutting. So I think that's excellent, and I don't have an issue with any of that there. This knife is really heavy. It's 7.5 ounces, and the knife world has sort of created this universal guideline for an EDC that if it weighs more than 4 ounces, it's not a good EDC, and by extension, some people seem to define that as not a good knife in general. I need to create an argument for that there. Not everybody thinks that way, but there are a lot of people who do. This knife seems to be always reviewed as an EDC knife, and then people pick it apart, especially for the weight. This is not a friendly EDC knife. This is an outdoor, hard-use, utility folding knife, and I think it should be looked at that way. The additional weight comes from the thickness of these liners, and I think that's an excellent choice for a hard-use folding knife, and I'm going to make my case for that. Steel is incredibly strong, and as you know, the reason that they add steel lock bar insert chips to titanium frame locks is because titanium will wear very quickly when it's in its raw form against a hardened steel blade tang. So they add that chip in there to reduce wear over time. This whole liner is already steel, and it's very thick, so surface contact is very good. And you're not going to have issues with wear over time for two reasons. One, because it's steel, and two, because when you're gripping this knife, your palm isn't directly contacting the liner. On a frame lock, you would be contacting it, squeezing it, pushing that frame lock further and further in, which arguments can be made that adds to additional security and lockup on a frame lock. But, you can, in my opinion, I prefer locking setups that allow you to use the knife for its intended purpose without having to worry about how the lockup or the locking mechanism is being interacted with under use. So the fact that that G10 scale is there, keeping your palm and pressure off of that lock bar and away from it, just means it can do its job and you can do your job, and everything just works out fine. The other reason I really like this setup is on a titanium frame lock, and actually any frame lock, there's a relief cut, meaning sort of a U-shaped cut in the frame, and that allows, that's the cut that allows you to easily disengage the in that case the frame lock or the liner lock. And so if there wasn't that relief cut there, you'd have a lot harder time moving that out of the way to disengage the lock. But some people will say, well, what that does is it creates a point where if you were to put pressure on the backside or the spine of the blade, if the lock were to fail without disengaging, it would fail at its weakest point, which would be that relief cut. First and foremost, why would you put pressure on this part of the blade? I want to be very clear about that. I don't condone that. There's no reason to, the spine whack thing or putting pressure back here, there's no reason to do that. But for argument's sake, if you were going to do that, the reason I like this design is this is not a relief cut. It's an oval cut right here. I'm not a knife maker, knife designer, and I don't have any experience in any particular field that would allow me to say definitively whether or not this is a good or a better design than a relief cut in a titanium frame lock, but I'm just going to give my opinion here why I like this. The fact that it's cut in an oval shape like this all the way through makes it so that the thickness on either side of that relief cut is maintained. So you don't have like an ultra thin portion, you just have this cutout here and then maximum thickness on the left and right side of that cutout, meaning the amount of force I would imagine it would take to actually make that lock bar bend out, which again, you should never be doing that, should be substantial compared to a titanium frame lock. I also want to be clear and say that I'm not saying that a titanium frame lock with a relief cut is a weak design, but I would venture to guess that this is a little bit stronger than that. I don't know that for sure, but it definitely gives me just the look of it, and the theory behind it, I think, is that you really can use this thing hard. And while you're cutting, putting torque on the blade, if you absolutely had to do that, I think the design and the execution of this liner here is only going to benefit you in that circumstance. So I have no issues with that whatsoever. It's well worth the added weight of a solid, super thick steel liner. You could also argue, well, titanium is far more corrosion resistant than steel, so you run the risk of your liners rusting. If you provide proper maintenance to your liners the same way that you would the blade, I don't think you're ever going to have an issue with that. I think it would take quite a while for the liners to develop so much corrosion that they can't function as liners or the locking mechanism for the knife. But that's just my opinion there. Again, take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. This is just my opinion. My word is not law. I'm just giving reasons why I enjoy this knife. So, really, really happy with that. Again, the argument I always make is it's not so much about the weight, it's about the carryability of this knife. If we compare this knife with the ZT-0303, which anybody who's familiar with that knife knows that it is an absolute monster in terms of how much space it takes up in your pocket, and it weighs the same amount, and it's a titanium frame lock. People who are carrying that knife, I think they know, if you're gonna carry that knife, that's pretty much gonna be an outdoor only kind of, I'm sure there are people who EDC it, but that takes up a lot of room in your pocket and it's pretty heavy. So most people who are carrying that are going to be using it outdoors. Same with this knife. Not a friendly EDC knife, but certainly a great knife for circumstances that would demand a harder use folder. But it's going to take up less room in your pocket and it weighs the same amount. I'm talking about this way. Length, with the handle and the overall length, I think they're about the same, but in terms of how wide they are, this one is not quite as wide, but it has the same stock thickness of blade and it weighs the same amount. And it's also got S35 VN steel, runs on bearings, and is literally less than half the price of that 0303. Not saying the 0303 is a bad knife, but in terms of ZT's hard use line, I can make a pretty good case for this one. I'm pretty happy with the setup here. Really, overall, the deal with this is that there's no pomp and frill. I mean, there's nothing like ooh shiny about. I mean, it is a straightforward, hard-use folding knife design. What you're paying for is exactly what you're getting here with the 0909. You are, if you're looking for a hard-use knife that's going to stand up to tasks that you would not put a regular folding knife through, then I think this is the best thing out there for the money right now. And once these are gone, they're gone. You can get them for 130 bucks right now. I think it's worth it. But once they're gone, they're gone. The only other thing I've ever heard people complain about on this knife is the fact that it runs on bearings. And if I'm understanding this correctly, there are some people who don't like that because they associate bearings with knives that are not meant for hard use. I can totally understand, you know, people's experience. Everybody having different experiences with folding knives, both light and hard use, and you know, whether or not they're getting that information from a trusted source or whether they get that information from their own experiences. Me personally, I've never put a bearing or phosphor bronze washer knife, folding knife through such hard use that I would be able to definitively say which one is better. I can tell you that Rob, who has let me review his 0562 and 0562 BLK on the channel, uses his standard version in LMAX every single day and has used it as a general EDC for the last 2 years. He's skinned multiple deer with it. I know he beats on it and does things that you wouldn't normally do with a folding knife. I've seen the thing caked up completely because he doesn't ever really clean it, and I've also seen it after he skins a deer, and I know how much gunk gets in there. The bearings in his case seem to force a lot of that gunk back out. It has never had an issue with deployment even after being caked up, and it's never had an issue with lockup, centering, or anything like that. Never developed any wiggle. Obviously, there's a certain point where you could get so much gunk in there that the bearings and the lock may not function, but you always have the option with an open back construction to blow those out, clean them out, take the knife apart, clean it back out, and you're good to go. I don't think bearings create any sort of disadvantage in a hard-use folding knife, and I think they're plenty durable in terms of what they can withstand in terms of like torque or force or anything like that. I think people are just afraid of them because they think they can gunk up. In my experience, or from what I've seen, bearings don't do that. But again, mileage will vary. Different experiences, different people, different, you know, how often or how hard people use knives is all different. But I don't think bearings is a bad choice for this, and I don't think you're going to have any issue with it. Use the knife responsibly. Use it as a knife, not as a hammer, a hatchet, or a pry bar, and provide proper maintenance, and I think you're going to be solid. For all of those reasons, this is one of my favorite knives of all time, but when viewed as a hard-use folding knife, this knife should not be viewed as an EDC knife. It is not an office carry or go to church with knife. This is designed as an outdoor hard-use folding knife, and when looked at in that light, I think it's damn near perfect. I mean, I don't know that I would really change anything about this if I was trying to design a perfect hard-use folding knife. And to top it all off, again, it's at a very reasonable price right now. You know, maybe the original $180 was hard to swallow for some people, given that people were expecting titanium frame locks in that price range. But even at that price, it wasn't bad. Maybe 160 bucks when it first came out would have been easier for people to swallow. But at 130 bucks, oh my gosh. I mean, what else out there is built like this, you know, that has this type of flipping action, that's going to come with early solid lockup, that's going to come with great fit and finish, that's going to come perfectly centered. Sorry, I'm shaking around a bit there. All your lines meet up, you know, the hardware looks good. You don't have any odd gaps or anything. I mean, the fit and finish is exactly what you'd expect from ZT. And you're getting this knife that's ultra capable with a great steel, and it's backed by a great designer, Les George. I don't know. I don't have anything negative to say about this thing other than that stupid pocket clip. WTF, ZT. Anyways, let me just get a good example of that action there so you guys can see. Oh, wonderful. This thing is a joy to flip, a joy to hold. You'll know it from the moment it hits your palm. This thing is solid and ready to go. You know, absolutely. Whether you're a collector, a user, knife enthusiast of any kind, I think this is a great knife, and I suggest you grab one before they're gone. So that's pretty much it today, guys. You know, I really love this knife, and I'd like to hear what anybody has to say in the comments section, whether you agree or disagree with me, so that's fine. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a like. And if you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check that content out. And if you enjoy all of my content, then please subscribe to my channel because there's definitely more coming. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.